If you've seen my previous videos on the Archie Sonic comic, then you probably know about Knuckles' father, Locke, who uses supercomputers to spy on his son. And you know what could have helped Big Knux out? A VPN, which is why this video is sponsored by Private Internet Access. Now, in case you've somehow never gone through this shtick before in a sponsorship, using a VPN, you can reroute your internet traffic, making it appear as though you're in a different country, hiding your true IP address. This creates a barrier between your internet service provider and your personal information, allowing for extra anonymity online. But the main thing I like about private internet access is that with it, you can gain access to region-restricted content. Really, using these streaming services without a VPN is like getting lost in the desert without a dad to magically guide you to an oasis full of water. Plus, you can use private internet access on an unlimited number of devices at the same time. That means that with just one subscription, you can use it on all your household devices and workspaces. Combined with their no logs policy, ease of use, support for peer-to-peer file sharing, and availability on all major operating systems, private internet access is a super versatile VPN that gets the job done and more. So use my link in the description below to get an 83% discount on private internet access. That's only $203 a month, along with 4 extra months free. Thanks to them for sponsoring today's video, and thank you for watching. If you know anything about the Archie Knuckles comic book series, it's probably that it's really different from what one would expect a story starring Knuckles the Echidna to be about. Religion, politics, tradition, divorce, race relations, drugs, destiny, and death, Archie Knuckles truly tackled it all, attempting to explore serious life lessons and complex moral scenarios for kids through Knuckles' own coming-of-age story. So readers watch this simple and earnest young boy who only worried about protecting his home from danger, come to learn that the world, his past, and his relationships are way, way, way more complex than he ever imagined. In particular, there's his relationship with his father, Locke. After training Knuckles as a guardian, this fella pretended to off himself in front of his son. Why? Well, so he could grow up to be independent, of course. As such, Locke watched him from the shadows for most of his life until, eventually, through mere chance, the two reunited, forcing Locke to finally reveal to Knuckles that he is not only a guardian, but a genetically modified mutant who Locke stole from his wife and experimented on in order to create a savior for the entire world based on a terrible dream he had. In doing so, Locke placed the weight of the world on his son's shoulders from before he was born, even if it cost Knuckles a relationship with his own mother. Hearing all this, you would probably assume that Knuckles' feelings toward his father were complicated, to say the least, right? But no, not really. First and foremost, Knuckles didn't see the secrets, lies, and manipulation. Instead, he simply saw that his father was back, and all he could feel was unconditional love for him. Sure, there were the rare times when Knuckles questioned his father's actions, but those feelings were always quickly brushed aside, usually by Locke himself. All that mattered to Knuckles was that he could once again hear his dad say, "I love you." Unfortunately though, I didn't feel the same way about the comic itself. While reading it, there was this strange disconnect I felt, because though the story was supposed to be about Knuckles growing and learning to face this complex world, the comic rarely gave Knuckles enough information to actually engage with what was happening in any meaningful way. And on the rare occasions it did, the conflict was quickly taken from him as we moved on to the next thing. However, it did make me feel something for Knuckles at least. Bad. I felt bad for him. How couldn't I after watching this poor, confused kid get constantly yanked around by never-ending lore dumps and the ceaseless multi-generational infighting of his own family? All of this to the point that Knuckles couldn't even see how terrible his own father had been to him. Eventually though, Knuckles awakened the powers his father gave him and became a living Chaos Emerald, able to alter reality itself with a simple no. Finally, the savior of the Echidnas and all of Mobius was here, except actually the Echidnas feared Knuckles and they immediately worked to kill him to protect the world. Huh. Yeah, just like that, Locke's gift to the world had backfired, as everyone either saw Knuckles as a threat or a tool they could mold into whatever they needed. In the end, this even cost Knuckles his life, as he sacrificed himself to save his already old, dying, and very evil uncle. But as usual, Knuckles didn't have time to think. He just did what he thought was right in the moment, and paid the price for it. Like always. All while Locke chilled in the background with only a passing thought to his son's plight, and even less of a reaction to his actual death. Because even a relationship as important as this was swept under the rug at a moment's notice in the Archie Knuckles comic. As many of you probably know, all of this was written by Ken Penders, a creator who seemingly wanted to focus on everything except Knuckles in his own story, for better or worse. Often, Penders would use his own life experiences and interactions with fans as a basis for the story, and that became most apparent with his final Knuckles... Knuckles came back to life? Anyway, That became clear in Penders' final Knuckles story, Mobius 25 years later, a future tale where Rad Red had become a father learning what it means to really guide their child. Here Knuckles realized that, in trying to avoid repeating his father's mistakes, he'd begun controlling his daughter in a different way, preventing her from being the person she wanted to be. In the end, Knuckles reflected on his last conversation with Locke, where his father finally acknowledged and apologized for all the wrong he had done, said that he was the one who ruined his marriage, that he put the world above his son, and that he would never be able to forgive himself for that. On his deathbed, all Locke wanted was for his son to know that he loved him. And with that, the Knuckles plot finally allowed Knuckles to grow, for his story to finally be about him in some way, to be about being a good dad. So this tale ended in honor of Penders' own father, with the story itself an artistic expression of their real-life turbulent relationship. As an individual story, this was an emotionally rich moment, but in context of the whole comic, it was kind of a mess. Sure, Knuckles comes to understand his father wasn't the best parent, but only after he dies. Meaning that all the other writers from here are stuck with a Knuckles who, even after his dad states every horrible thing he's done, can only say, "I always thought you were the best." Sure, future Knuckles got to be a compelling character with an interesting relationship with Locke, but what about the Locke and Knuckles here and now that I'm going to be spending the rest of this comic with? And so, with the passing of the torch to a new creative team, 25 years later was instead turned into an alternate future, allowing for us to finally tell a story about this father-son relationship in the comic's main timeline. And it's the story that made Archie Knuckles the best Knuckles.
Dad, promise me you'll keep an eye on the Emerald while I'm gone.
While you're...
Yo, Nux, there's our ride.
But what of your duties as guardian of Angel Island?
Seeing everything that's happened here while I was away has made me realize that if Robotnik takes over Mobius, the whole planet will be in trouble, not just Angel Island. I can't let that happen.
So now that your powers have returned and you have the power to fight, you'd rather turn your back on your home rather than reclaiming it from evil.
Dad,
Suit yourself. One of the reasons Knuckles never really realized how abusive his father was is that, because Knuckles was always so obedient, Locke never had much cause to lash out at his son the way he always did with his wife, someone who refused to be submissive. As such, Knuckles mainly received affirmation from Locke, and all he ever internalized about his dad were the moments where he did try to be in his life more, instead of the many times he refused or had to be forced to. And so, when Knuckles decides to strike out on his own, to make a decision he feels is right, Locke doesn't try to reason with or guide his son. Instead, he reframes Knuckles' thoughts, tells him what they mean, and makes sure he gets the last word. And Knuckles' reaction makes it clear that he didn't expect this at all. His father has never treated him so harshly. Now, this reaction obviously doesn't come out of nowhere. Locke has always been a character who needs to be right. Beyond that, Angel Island has been under Eggman's control for an entire year, with its main protectors and Locke's extended family, the Brotherhood of Guardians, missing for mysterious reasons. At some point, Locke was captured and tortured until Knuckles came back to save him, along with the rest of the island. So it makes sense that Locke would be desperate. But here's the thing. Locke has lived his entire life desperate. Desperate to save the world, desperate to mold Knuckles into a savior, and now desperate to rebuild his home and find his lost guardian family, which he attempts to do by trying to kidnap a wandering shadow so he can experiment on him. Though at least he tried to ask him permission first. But desperate times and all that, just a typical day for Locke. All this is to say that any time Locke has been pushed to his limit, he chooses the words and actions that lead to more pain for his family, all for achieving the greater good, or rather, his way of achieving the greater good, which leads us here. As once again, things are getting worse on Angel Island, and so Locke decides to contact Knuckles. This scene between them is fantastic. The art and dialogue perfectly exposes the underlying nuances of their relationship that, outside of a couple stories, have largely gone unexplored. Because Locke doesn't ask for his son's help. He demands it, brushing aside any of his complaints, concerns, or autonomy. This time not with aggression, but with a cold stoicism. To him, his son's return is a foregone conclusion, and his friends are just soldiers he can command. Just like before Knuckles was even born, Locke has decided who Knuckles is and what he will do. No, what he must do as a guardian. Any questioning, any attempt at conversation, compromise, or connection is met only with further demands. Locke, as always, must be correct. This all creates such a convincing portrayal of a domineering parent controlling their child. Locke is this massive figure looming over Knuckles throughout their conversation, as his father, but also as a symbol of all the abuse he suffered as part of his so-called duty. And from Locke's perspective, Well, his son is just an image in the emerald, another in a long list of sacrifices he's made in the name of responsibility and tradition. And when Knuckles tells his father no, that he won't be coming home and the Chaotix won't either, Locke's cold, controlled facade finally cracks. The idea that his son would say no to him? It's not just upsetting, it's unbelievable. But Knuckles loves his dad. He always has. Any mistakes his father made have either been forgiven or swept under the rug. So here, he still tries to reason with him. He tries to tell him why he's doing what he's doing, and more than that, to appeal to his father. He harkens back to his father's teachings. Never approach a situation head on. Look at all its sides. Using his father's wisdom, Knuckles is standing by his prior conclusion. Defeat Dr. Robotnik. He's the source of everyone's suffering. With him gone, Echidnas and the world at large can truly begin to rebuild. And here's the thing. Knuckles' position about this has made sense from the get-go. The Brotherhood's long-standing refusal to get directly involved with the Doctor has been a huge problem. Using his father's own words and teachings, Knuckles is able to not just frame this around what he wants to do, but instead what he feels a Guardian should do. So yes, he's going to stay down here righting wrongs, just like Knuckles says the Brotherhood has claimed to do for years. And Knuckles' little smirk shows that he feels he's finally managed to win this argument with his father, effectively turning his own logic back on him. Knuckles has proven himself to him as both a son and a guardian. This mixture of emotions from Knuckles is so compelling to watch. Seeing him stand up for what he believes is right while also finally standing up for himself, facing Locke as an equal. Knuckles is actually making his self-worth known, and the ball is now entirely in Locke's court. A chance to connect, to compromise, to communicate with his son. You have to come back, Knuckles. I cannot guarantee the safety of your mother or her family.
You did not!
Obviously, this doesn't come across as a genuine concern at all. No, this is purely a last-ditch gambit to get his son to do what he wants, finally abandoning all pretense of duty and honor and instead appealing to his emotions with what's basically a veiled threat. Not that Locke would do anything himself, of course, but that this could become another weight on Knuckles' shoulders. Finally, Locke appeals to Knuckles using his family, but not as his family. And just like that, the conversation between them is cut short. Of course, Knuckles is shaken by this, but even still, he holds onto the trust he has that his father would never let his mother, his brother, or his people get hurt. Locke will protect their home while Knuckles fights to save everyone. Or as Tails puts it, Knuckles has made Mobius his island to protect. And he also says that his father will surely see that too, ending as Knuckles promises to return to Angel Island one day. Meanwhile, Locke sits in the Chaos Chamber, beside the same emerald he carried his son to as part of the destiny he had determined. But he's alone now, without his brothers, without his son, with only the Master Emerald. But still he sits, still he waits, performing his duty, just as he's always done. Really, the only one left who even remotely resembles an ally to Locke is the ever-mysterious and incredibly suspicious Dr. Finitivus, who Locke is forced to rely on when the Master Emerald is almost stolen, standing in the place where Locke would have much rather had his son. Regardless, Locke clearly distrusts him. If he didn't, then maybe he could leave Finitivus to watch over the Master Emerald so he could search for the Brotherhood full-time, which is exactly what Finitivus wants. So, as a show of goodwill, he hires the Destructics to act as bodyguards to protect the last of the Echidnas. The Guardians have fallen so far that now a member of their most hated enemy, the Dark Legion, is picking up the pieces. And as one final gesture of trust, Finitivus hands Locke a warp ring, allowing him to check up on the Emerald in the island anytime he wants. If you prefer, I could attempt to summon Knuckles to assist us. No. As you wish, Guardian. Yep, what convinces Locke isn't logic or trust. It's simply that Locke, once again, cannot bring himself to face his son. But this time, that desperation that's always guided him has a tinge of resentment as well. What I really like about this whole conflict is that Locke isn't wrong for wanting Knuckles' help. This clearly isn't something he can do alone, and when Locke said he couldn't guarantee Knuckles' mom's safety, a part of that statement was based in a genuine assessment of the situation. But because Locke needs to be in control, because he can't communicate, and because Knuckles has spent his entire life at the whims of his guardian family, often to the detriment of himself and others, everything breaks down, as a father and son are driven further and further apart. If anything, their conversation caused Knuckles to double down on his plan, because now it needs to work. The risk he's taking by leaving his people must pay off. And so Knuckles naively believes his father, the man he's looked up to his entire life, can do it alone. Thankfully though, in many ways, Knuckles has succeeded. He and his friends consistently prove their value in the fight against Eggman and any other force of evil, culminating in the battle against the Egg Beater, as Knuckles, Vector, and Mighty overwhelm and disarm one of Eggman's greatest inventions in seconds. Heck, Mighty in particular is the entire reason our heroes even win at all, as without him, Snively would have rounded up Sonic's remaining friends that helped the Blue Blur to bounce back in the first place. This celebration at New Mobotropolis isn't just that the Freedom Fighters are overjoyed that they regained their home. It's proof that Knuckles' decision paid off. He fought for the last remnants of hope for Planet Mobius, even after it had been burned to the ground, until it could become a fortified haven able to hold off even the Eggman Empire. All made possible by fighting alongside his friends. It's incredibly cathartic, but on a more personal note for me, man, does it just feel good to see Knuckles happy. This poor kid could never catch a break in his many B stories, let alone his own comic, as his friends were slowly but surely phased out of his life as his all-encompassing duties as Guardian took precedent. But now Knuckles is surrounded by those friends, and his duty as a Guardian of Knothole actually seems to bring him joy. He helps reunite families, allows closure for a lost anti-hero, and encourages his true blue pal. I've always been a huge fan of his dynamic with Sonic in particular, because these two genuinely feel like brothers to me. It's so rewarding to watch their comedically charged bickering evolve into good-natured ribbing, until now they're close enough that Knuckles will actually play along with Sonic's antics. Well, up to a point, of course. Sonic has always been that sudden shakeup that comes in and out of Knuckles' life, and so it's really heartwarming to see how now they look out for each other. Sonic even wingmans for his buddy when Big Knux is stunned at seeing his girlfriend in a dress. I hate dressing up like this.
I think she looks good. Don't you, Knux? Yes.
Thanks, son. These two are such a fun pair, where Bunny and Antoine are the lovey-dovey couple who would never say a negative thing about their partner, even as a joke. Julie, Sue, and Knuckles are more than willing to poke fun and laugh at each other. And when Sonic asks if they'll get married one day, Julie Sue basically goes, nah, dresses are dumb, while Knuckles goes, yeah, marriage is dumb. Like, okay, you two, you can act all nonchalant or whatever, but I see you making eyes at the wedding and making out in the back of the car. So don't act like you're above being adorable together. Actually, what Knuckles really said here is way sweeter. Antoine and Bunny are welcome to their wedding, but I think my word to Julie Sue is as good as anything. So yeah, they're great. The contrast of these hot-headed and grumpy teens being all cute together is fun. Like Julie Sue calling Knuckles hun and sweetie, or how Knuckles' version of flirting is complimenting his girls' fighting abilities. I really like this moment where Knuckles sees Julie Sue crying after she thought she didn't save Knuckles and Mighty in time, and so Knuckles breaks the tension by teasing her about her hacking methods. And the basis of their relationship makes it even sweeter, because even though they were raised in opposing enemy factions and irreparably broken homes, they consistently express such unwavering loyalty to one another. In a way, their relationship is the ultimate example of how Knuckles breaking away from the Guardian's typical ways can be for the better. How trusting himself and what he wants and feels can make the world a better place. Speaking of making the world a better place though, Knuckles has succeeded in doing just that. So with New Mobotropolis rebuilt and our heroes now safer than ever, Knuckles feels he can afford to take some time to check up on his home, using his chaos powers to hopefully take him there. Despite his friends' pleas for him to bring them with him, Knuckles chooses to set aside the lesson he's been learning and go it alone, feeling that only he can face his father. And he doesn't make this decision out of anger. Instead, it's a well-meaning belief that he can and should handle this on his own. After all, Knuckles has only gotten this far by trusting his gut. So what could go? Of all the wasted potential buried beneath the Archie Knuckles comics' endless stream of ideas, the biggest and most embarrassing of them all might just be Enerjak. This reality-bending demigod that Knuckles' ancestor Dimitri became after absorbing the power of the Chaos Emerald centuries ago. So he went mad with power, but was soon crushed under a mountain, defeated and gone. Until eventually, in the modern day, he returned, intent on completing his goal of reshaping Mobius in his image. Sounds like a big deal, but what did Enerjak actually do? Well, he got buried by ants, got punched in the jaw and launched into space, killed Knuckles because Knuckles bullied him, but not really because God reset that 10 seconds later. Then he was immediately kicked out of his own story arc so that some other villain could become the focus, and that's it. Yeah, seriously. Sure, the Echidna behind the mask, Dimitri, remained, but the presence and potential of this all-powerful deity completely vanished. And so imagine my surprise when over 100 issues later, Dr. Finitivus, having convinced Locke to leave the Master Emerald in his care, calmly announces that the power and name of Enerjak will be known once more.
Instead of wasting time here, you ought to be prepping your bunker. What are you yammering on about, rodent? We just got word that Enerjak is coming back. I'm sure you've got a file on him or something. Incomplete files. Tell me everything you know.
Immediately, the Archie Sonic comic reestablishes the power of Enerjak by just simply acknowledging that, well, he's not from the Archie Sonic comic. He's simply a name they've heard, a monster from another story entirely, the Knuckles comic. And that's how he's treated and feels throughout these introductory issues, sold perfectly through Sonic's sudden change in demeanor. He doesn't joke while fighting Eggman, no, he threatens the Doctor, telling him to get his act together and not screw this up. Everyone is going to need to work together if they want to survive. If Sonic the Hedgehog is telling you not to rush into a fight, you know things are bad. And who's the one to deliver this news about Enerjak in the first place? Well, it's Dimitri, the prior Enerjak. And just like that, I too feel captivated by the name. Because now it's clear that something is very wrong. Enerjak is someone new, and that context makes this reveal feel all the more special. This beam of golden light shooting into the heavens to reveal a single silent page, his body pulsating with power. Enerjak actually feels like he's capable of reshaping the world. And so he gets to work doing just that. First, the dingoes. Ever since the Echidnas lifted Angel Island into the sky, the dingoes have been a problem for them. They stole Echidna technology, they invaded Echidna cities, they staged attacks against Echidna civilians, and finally, they joined rank with Dr. Eggman to hunt them. But of course, there was the dingoes side of all this. Their home was torn away from them. They were treated as unintelligent savages by the supposedly superior Echidnas and the Brotherhood. They were rounded up and placed in camps of their own by the Dark Legion. This long-standing feud has been a back and forth, with both groups committing unforgivable acts against the other. But why would Enerjak care about their point of view? This Echidna god need not consider the perspective of these lowly beings. No, he finds them guilty. So he tears away their suits and their technology with a wave of his hand, and lifting his staff, he effortlessly sends them to wander in the desert. There, they will suffer, and perhaps learn some humility. As for the leader who joined rank with Eggman, his fate is to vanish with his city. Both of them disintegrated with a simple slice through the air. In 2 pages, Enerjak has effectively erased a conflict that has plagued the Echidnas for centuries. Next, the Dark Legion, a techno-cult that acted as the first true divide in Echidna society and a group that's constantly tried to destroy and control the rest of Echidna kind, battling with the Guardians for centuries. At one point, Enerjak joined forces with them, but now they fight against him. They're separate factions led by individuals obsessed with taking control for themselves. But Enerjak is a merciful god, so he heals one of their leaders, Remington, whose body was brutalized during the chaos on Angel Island, outfitted with cybernetics that altered his mind. But Enerjak won't stop there. All of the Dark Legion are made flesh and blood again, no longer infected with the technology they foolishly grafted onto their bodies. They are liberated. I adore this panel showing the Dark Legion's reaction, or rather, its members' reactions. Some are shocked, their emotions unreadable, others are concerned. Then there are those who are angry or whose faces fill with a gleeful smile. It really humanizes this group. The Brotherhood has always placed them in a single box, all of them one entity as opposed to individuals. But here, well, I believe that they are a cult full of members with their own reasons for joining. They're their own people. And Enerjak's one-size-fit-all solution to their problem is immediately revealed to be presumptuous. But really, what are they going to do about it? Finally, the remaining Echidnas, those who have been tormented by the dingoes, Knuckles' own mother and brother among them, terrified by what they're seeing. For them, it's now time to return to the past, to the place they were all meant to be before those years and years of infighting destroyed their society and their way of life. So they'll return to the Promised Land, the birthplace of the Echidnas. They will return to Albion, teleported in an instant, whether they like it or not. All the while, back home, our heroes watch through a spy camera. Each of Enerjak's sweeping changes contrasted by Sonic and Tails uselessly searching for Knuckles on Angel Island. But there's no longer any time left to find him. Matters have already been settled. Now it's time for Enerjak to reshape Mobius at large, starting with those who would foolishly attempt to spy on a god. In a single issue, Enerjak has finally lived up to his premise. Everything here works to create such a convincing portrayal of an all-powerful being who casually changes the stakes of the story in an irrevocable way. He's strong enough to bring a decade's worth of overly complex comic lore in line. And as much as I said other characters' reactions are used to give gravity to Enerjak's return, Julie Sue is the one who really does it for me. That pure desperation we see that Knuckles could already be dead. And why wouldn't she believe that? She was there the last time Enerjak returned. She experienced his power firsthand, knows that Knuckles would have been gone if not for the interference of the now dead gods. Combined together, all of this paints the picture of a girl who truly believes every second wasted as another where the most important person in her life could be gone. And in some ways, she's right. So Enerjak arrives at New Mobotropolis, effortlessly lifting the shield that kept Eggman's entire armada at bay. He floats down to the freedom fighters and the Chaotix, but not to hurt them. No, he's here to help them, to make things right. But it's too late for that, isn't it? I don't care what you do to me, but I'll make you pay for destroying him.
Destroy? Do to you? I would never hurt you, my love. And I can't very well destroy myself.
That's right. Knuckles wasn't killed by Enerjak. Knuckles has become Enerjak, which immediately begs many questions, such as, how did this happen? Well, of course, that comes back to Dr. Finitivus. See, this mad doctor knew that Knuckles would eventually return home, and so he had the Guardian ambushed and brought to the Chaos Chamber. There, Finitivus reveals what has happened in Knuckles' absence. While he was messing around down below, 90% of the Echidnas were killed by Dr. Eggman. Horrified, Knuckles attempts to harness the power of the Master Emerald, desperately trying to tap into the strength that's given him to save the world and his people. He will set this right. This is his duty and his responsibility. And just like that, the trap is sprung. Because while Locke left the Master Emerald in Finitivus' care, he placed a spell on it, one that, as he puts it, would twist Knuckles' intentions to fit Finitivus' ideals. And this one detail, the fact that Knuckles isn't being brainwashed, that he isn't simply possessed by a god, is what makes this twist go from pretty cool to incredibly fascinating. Because as we find out, Finitivus' goals are actually quite simple. He wants to destroy the world, wants everything to be erased in a wave of emerald fire, and he has given Knuckles the unwavering conviction to do it. But as we've seen, Knuckles has done things differently. Because Knuckles doesn't want to destroy his friends or his people, he came here to rescue them. So it's clear that Knuckles is still inside, that his personal feelings are combating his ultimate goal. He wants to save his friends from the inevitable end of everything. But they won't listen. They don't want this at all. Having Knuckles rule over them as a god with an iron fist, allowing him to erase the technology that allows their AI companion to exist and protect them in the first place, letting their friends succumb to and be consumed by this power, they could never stand here and watch that happen. So Julie Sue pleads with Knuckles, asking him to stop this before things get worse. And Knuckles' response? I'm very disappointed in all of you. He reaches for Julie Sue, lifts her into the air, and intends to do to her what he did to the Dark Legion, to make her whole again and liberate her from her disgusting half-cybernetic body, because he loves her. Obviously, this isn't something Knuckles would ever do, but it's also not something that Finitivus would care about either. So, what gives? Well, that's because Knuckles is possessed. But it's not as simple as his body being controlled by someone else. No, he's possessed by the ideology that taught him to see technology as a danger. Possessed by the traditions that taught him to put his plans and purposes above others. Possessed by the destiny his father thrust upon him from before he was even born. The subconscious desires his family drilled into him with lesson after lesson. Possessed by the island that hangs over his head, symbolizing everything he's been shaped into. Knuckles is possessed by the indomitable desire to fulfill his duty as the savior of the world. And the fear and confusion that caused him to reach for the power to do so in the first place has now combined everything he's ever learned or felt into an uncompromising god complex. Because with Finitivus' spell, Knuckles no longer has to second guess himself. He no longer feels doubt over his decisions or relationships. Whatever he feels in the moment, he'll do. And all of it is filtered through a twisted vision that believes if the world won't listen to him, the only way to truly save it is to burn it to the ground and start over. And all with the power to see it through. So, of course, this brings us to another equally important question. Why is Finitivus doing this? After all, when he was introduced, he was just a techno-mage of the Dark Legion. Certainly a sketchy, frightening figure, but bringing Enerjak back? Where did all this come from? Well, it came from the fact that we've already met Finitivus before. Yes, he was here many issues before his formal introduction in issue 139. See, back in the comic's 90th issue, following a heated confrontation with the leaders of Albion, Knuckles was transformed into Chaos Knuckles. Finally, he had tapped into the power his father had imbued in him. With his strength, he could help even more people. However, the leader of Albion, Galena, didn't see things this way. No, she was scared, afraid of what she didn't understand. And as the Echidnas had decided so many times in the past, uncertainty couldn't be tolerated. So she captured Knuckles by threatening to kill his friends, and her scientists quickly got to work using a special suit they had created that would absorb his energy, draining him in the process. These Echidnas knew this experiment could and probably would kill Knuckles, but they were fine with the sacrifice. So they continued to try and take Knuckles' power from him, even as he struggled against them, and even as one of their scientists continued to absorb more and more. This man warned them that he couldn't take it, but they continued to push Knuckles, to push him. And so, as Knuckles escaped the process and went off to suffer alone, we saw in the background of this tiny panel the man sprawled out on the floor, overwhelmed by chaos radiation. But this man didn't die. He survived, and he would never be the same. That's right. This random background character from the seemingly forgotten scene from almost 100 issues earlier in the main comic, he is Dr. Finitivus. But this isn't just interesting because it's a neat callback. No, it's interesting because this callback has meaning. After all, this experiment only took place because, once again, Echidna Society's leaders decided what Knuckles' existence meant. Only instead of a savior, he was now deemed a monster. And through that decision, someone or something else was born from that very same control they constantly exerted over him, making Dr. Finitivus the final culmination of all the ways the Echidnas have failed Knuckles. And immediately Galena realized he was different, smarter, stronger, but more importantly, he had a new perspective on life and began to violently condemn the state of their world and society. He wanted change. So this being, born of fear, created new inventions to help reshape Mobius. The people of Albion, however, feared him, and they theorized that all that chaos energy had turned him into a photo-negative of Knuckles. So if Knuckles was created to save the world, Finitivus was created with a desire to destroy it. Ultimately, Galena was the final vote in deciding how to deal with this problem. So Finitivus would be euthanized. For the greater good, of course. What I love here is that while we get plenty of compelling information about Finitivus, it is all funneled through another character. Galena frames him as a villain from the get-go, just as she continues to frame what she did to Knuckles as completely justified. She talks about Finitivus' call for change like it was always a radical's dangerous ramblings. But for all we know, maybe there was more to it. I mean, the warp rings are his main invention, which don't seem inherently dangerous. If anything, they would allow the Echidnas to help the world with greater efficiency, connecting everyone. So maybe he truly did want to help the world by enacting change in a society that desperately needs it, as we find out later that Finitivus has opinions on Echidna society that I agree with. He acknowledges the Brotherhood's failure as a protector of the world, the hypocrisy of their actions and constant infighting with the Dark Legion. And he's also just a big history buff. The reason he convinced Knuckles to take on the form of Enerjak? Well, he found it fitting that the name that began all this nonsensical lore in the first place would be the one to end it. He's an Archie Knuckles comic nerd, baby! He's tired of Ken Pender's BS and he's ready to burn it to the ground. So is Finitivus literally an anti-Knuckles? I don't know. And that's not to say interpreting him as that is incorrect. Based on all he's done, I could absolutely see that being the case. But it can also undeniably be read another way, as a self-fulfilling prophecy based on the Echidna's overconfidence and extreme actions. It's a splendid example of leaving a villain mysterious while giving enough details to make them thematically compelling. Because regardless, what I do know about Finitivus is that he was the one who made the Brotherhood disappear. I know that Finitivus was the one who lowered Albion's defenses and led Eggman straight to them as he watched them die, dropping his people's population by 90% and leaving the homeland of the Echidnas a wasteland. All that information we got about him from Galena, those were her final words, a message left as she hid in regret of what she had unleashed upon the world. So we watch as in her last moments, she finally says, I'm sorry. What I know is that whether it was before or after escaping murder at the hands of his people, Finitivus became what Albion feared Knuckles would be. And now Finitivus has turned Knuckles into that monster as well. And so, in the end, the Archie Sonic comic has decided that, instead of allowing Knuckles to finally choose his destiny, to be who he wants to be and break free of all the baggage that's held him down, we're going to lean into the fact that Knuckles has never been in control of his life, never been the main character of his story. He's a tool for his people, a mirror that reflects their darkest desires and their greatest sins. Knuckles has become a world-ending amalgamation of his entire life and all of Echidna Kind's expectations for that life. So he'll burn the world to the ground and rebuild from there. Just another sacrifice. And now, no one can stop him.
You dare use my power against me? You better believe it.
While everyone else is panicking or plotting about how to deal with Enerjak, Sonic is busy putting his all into saving Knuckles, undermining any attempt made to destroy his buddy, or leave him as this monster for a moment longer. And how does he plan to do that? By beating the crap out of him, of course, using Super Sonic's positive aura to counteract the dark spell placed on Knuckles, kind of like what he did with Perfect Chaos. Does he know with 100% certainty this will work? That risking the safety of the entire world on this gamble will pay off? Of course not. But where so many people in Knuckles' life considered those odds and chose to prioritize the world over an ally or a son, Sonic doesn't even consider any other option than saving his brother. And that heart feeds into my favorite part of this fight, and the reason I actually find it to be pretty emotional. Because Sonic's way of beating the evil out of Knuckles isn't actually based on raw strength at all. No, Sonic is giving Knuckles a noogie, teasing him for not wanting to be pink, breaking his stuff, and calling him a doofus. And these childish insults are all based on their earlier back and forths, especially the Super Sonic vs. Hyper Knuckles special, a title that sounds like you're about to read the ultimate battle, but instead is a story so goofy that it dedicates a 2-page spread to these all-powerful boys pulling each other's hair and winding up for a Knuckles sandwich. And so it just really connects with me when I realize this fight isn't about being a more serious, proper version of that premise. No, instead, it's about Sonic desperately fighting to bring his friend back to those sillier days. To turn this battle between gods for the fate of the world into just another petty brawl between the Blue Blur and Rad Red.
There, now you look more like Knuckles. Do you feel more like Knuckles? Thunder Arrow! Aside from annoy, your magic does diddly. What part of invulnerable don't you get? Would you prefer if it were crunch time? Yeah, that's more like it.
Just want to say, I love that as far as I can remember, Sonic has never actually heard Knuckles say, "It's crunch time." So Sonic is basically just like, yeah, that sounds like something dumb Knuckles would say. And yet, under all that snark and sarcasm is a Sonic who's dead serious about saving his friend. And I love that. Unfortunately though, Sonic isn't the only one involved in this fight, because as you've probably noticed, there's been one person missing during all of this, and he's the one to suggest killing Enerjak, and by extension Knuckles, in the first place. That's right, it's Locke. Of course it is. After all, Locke isn't like Sonic or Julie Sue. In his mind, this monster is no longer his son, and any attempt to convince him otherwise is pushed aside by Locke simply saying that the process will be perfectly humane. This moment, it really exposes Locke for who he truly is. At the end of the day, his duty to the Brotherhood, to the world, will always consume his duty as a father. He can't allow his own feelings to get in the way here. And so, just like when Locke decided the only way to save the world was to manipulate and mutate his son, the most extreme action is once again viewed as the only option. The Brotherhood agreed they would kill Enerjak if he came back, and so he shall die. A device made by a grandfather and a father will now put down their own kin. But Sonic destroys that weapon, and so Locke accepts their inevitable doom. The fools shouldn't have stopped him and his plan. Oh, would you stop it? You've had plenty of chances to destroy the son you hate. I don't hate Knuckles, but he's become everything we worked to create. It was our training and your experiments on his chaos energy that lead to this. But he is not a mistake to bury, Locke. We are as much to blame, if not more. Come on, Archimedes. Let's see if we can find a way to help Sonic, and the Guardian we love enough to rescue. Locke has always been such a fascinating character to me, even back in the Knuckles comic. Intentional or not, the contrast of his love for his son and his horrible actions made him surprisingly compelling. Because for every step he took to better his relationship with his son, there was always a step backward. Their relationship would always return to its terrible status quo. Like when Locke questioned how he'd acted as a parent, only to double down when his son questioned those actions himself. Or how Locke, on 2 separate occasions, realized the danger of what he'd done to his son, of the monster he'd potentially created, only to never mention it again. And while Locke mourning his son's death for a single panel, then immediately returning to his job as almost certainly the result of haphazard writing, it once again fed into the idea that Locke would never truly change. And that's why his deathbed confession made so much sense. Having no more strength to enact his will on others or the world, he was finally forced to reflect, and was able to come to proper conclusions about himself and try to repent in the final hours he had left with his family. But, of course, Locke's confession wasn't just for them. No, it was for himself. So he pled with them, wanting them to know that he loved them, wanting them to believe in the father and husband they were about to lose. And so I think it's fitting that here, the thing that finally gets Locke to reflect is not that his son needs his dad, but that someone claimed Locke never loved his boy, that he hates him. So Archimedes and Julie Sue go to confront Finitivus at the Master Emerald. They will do whatever it takes to stop the spell he placed on Knuckles. However, Finitivus reveals that there's only one way to break the hex. Someone must sacrifice their own life. It's a trump card he clearly views as unbeatable. As far as he's known, Echidna kind has never been willing to do such a thing. But Julie Sue doesn't falter. Not for a second. Julie Sue doesn't need a big reason or to even reflect on all Knuckles has done for her. She simply can't watch someone she loves suffer any longer. And the same goes for Archimedes, who is willing, without question, to take responsibility for any part he played in this madness, which creates a perfect contrast. No, old friend, he will need your counsel. Let me save my boy. Please understand. Help him understand. I did it to protect him from a future terror. I never wanted to turn him into that terror. I only wanted to keep him safe. I absolutely adore Locke's expressions throughout this scene. He looks like he's constantly on the verge of tears. The art shows me how sorry he is that it took him this long to realize what he's become, the wrong he's done. But what I love is how the dialogue contrasts that. Because even in this moment, where he's supposed to be saving his son, Locke still needs to be understood. He pleads with Julie Sue to believe that he does love his son, to let Knuckles know he does. He continues to justify his actions, focuses on his good intentions. He only wanted to keep his son safe when he placed the weight of the world on his shoulders. The Brotherhood had good reasons for making Knuckles go through so much. Unlike on his deathbed in a now alternate future, Locke doesn't have time to humble himself and properly accept all he's done. All this prideful, broken man can do now is beg. I understand. He will too. Then there's only one thing left to do. In so many ways, this is where he sacrificed his son's life. This is where it all went wrong. At this emerald, at this symbol of his duty. And he'll never be able to make that right. All the neglect, all the controlling words, all the distance, all the abuse, all the ways he's failed him. His chance to be a father, his child, his marriage. He already sacrificed those. He only has one thing left. Just one more thing left to sacrifice. So Archimedes teleports Finitivus away, buying Locke just enough time to sit at the Master Emerald and tap into its power one final time. He prays. The servers are the seven chaos. Chaos is power enriched by the heart. But then he ends the spell differently. Not with the usual words of control or responsibility as a guardian and the purpose of their very existence. Instead, Locke gives up that control. And he ends this prayer not as a guardian, but as a father. With his dying breath finally being honest with himself, setting Knuckles free from the curse that he can only now admit he placed upon him. Release my boy. Give him his own life to lead. And it's that desperation, that final moment of shame, and the pain it brings Locke to accept it. That's what makes his sacrifice hit so hard for me. Because, yes, this scene was Locke's last conversation he ever had with his son. The final thing he said to him was a veiled threat about Knuckles' own mother. So Locke doesn't get to apologize to his son. He can never go back and change what he did. He will never get a second chance with his family. All he can do is die. And most fitting of all, he doesn't even truly succeed in setting Knuckles free. Sure, the spell is broken, but how could one act of repentance ever undo the consequences of what just happened? Of all Knuckles did as Enerjak and the way it will weigh on his conscience. And so, after Finitivus flees and denies Knuckles even the satisfaction of properly defeating him, Knuckles comes to a new conclusion. Let's go back down to the city. Let everyone know you're okay. No, you go back if you want. I'm never making that mistake again. I am the last guardian of Angel Island. I will protect the Master Emerald, and I will do it alone if I have to. And so, even in death, Locke has failed his son. Locke has left the weight of the world on his shoulders. Now we'll just have to see how long Knuckles can bear it this time.
Come on, Knuckles. We can take the place back ourselves. I don't know. Maybe they have a point. What? Dude, I know you don't agree with them. You need to do what you think is right. I did! And now my dad is... Nux, look. Do whatever you want.
Speaking from my own experience, for me, one of the hardest parts of coping with a traumatic event or a loss is the sense of helplessness. Sometimes that helplessness stems from the lowest moments of the experience, but often it's the lingering reminders that makes things so much worse. That wave that consumes even the moments where I feel like I have or already should have made progress, along with the feeling that I need to somehow fix what went wrong, but also knowing that sometimes there is no answer. I say all this because it's those feelings that Knuckles desperately fights against going forward, and the way the comic explores that inner battle is incredibly effective. From here, so much of Knuckles' character is defined by what happened on that one day. First, he glides over Albion, the ruins where he placed his people, including even his mom and baby brother. But he doesn't go down to speak with them. No, he can't face them, not after what he did. It's better if he keeps his distance. Maybe if they stay here, they can remain safe. Safe from Eggman, safe from the usual infighting, and above all else, safe from him. Much like his father, Knuckles finds that he can't bring himself to face his family, or his friends. Then Knuckles goes to visit the dingoes, now living in the desert on Angel Island where he sent them. So Stryker, the dingo's former leader who Knuckles fought so long ago, shows him that they're rebuilding and thriving. It's only a matter of time before they return to the interior of Angel Island the Echidnas have kept from them for so long. But Knuckles, unlike so many other Echidnas in the past, isn't here to judge or subjugate the dingoes. He's here to take responsibility, to tell Stryker that he was Enerjak, that he placed Stryker's people here, that he killed Stryker's son. Finally, it's time for a guardian to be judged by the people they've looked down on for so long. Mice, Cage was a traitor. Your frankness is refreshing for an Echidna. You can expect to see my army on the return before long.
I understand. Thank you for your time, General.
Then there's the Dark Legion, who had their technology stripped away by Knuckles, who had their way of life stripped away by Knuckles. Most of them aren't simply going to accept that. They'll want back what's theirs, but at this point, how would they ever do that? It's not as though the Echidnas have a bunch of tech lying around right now, and that only leaves them one option, doesn't it? Dr. Eggman. So, in a cruel twist, Knuckles' actions as Enerjak have resulted in this. And so many of his people joining the maniac who almost destroyed their island and slaughtered most of their people. As such, Knuckles is now forced to fight against them as he attempts to stop Eggman. But Knuckles offers the Dark Legion a chance for peace, complete and total forgiveness. After all, he knows that they were backed into a corner and that at the end of the day, this and everything else is all his fault. Or at the very least, that's what Knuckles tells himself. In a desperate bid to make some sense of all that's happened to him, to not be a victim constantly asking what's going on, Knuckles takes full responsibility for everything. You can tell he wants his family to forget him, that he wants to be punished by the dingoes, and that he wants to fix his mistakes and redeem himself. Yet, at every turn, Knuckles is reminded by others that, no, reality is far more complicated than that. Albion is only a wasteland because of its leader's own actions. The dingoes aren't just helpless victims. No, as their own leader says, his son was a traitor. Someone who, along with many other dingoes, chose to throw in their lot with Eggman to subjugate an entire island and its people. Meanwhile, the Dark Legion's leaders chose to side with that very same monster for their own gain and a chance at power. And it's those same leaders who refuse to give it up now. Then there's the Brotherhood and their ways, which is not what Knuckles should be trying to replicate, closing himself off from his loved ones and suffering in silence for the greater good. In the end, Finitivus and Locke made their choices, and they did so with far darker intentions than Knuckles ever has. The only choice Knuckles made was not going home sooner, but that wouldn't have stopped Finitivus from destroying Albion. That wouldn't have saved New Mobotropolis. Sure, maybe none of these other awful things would have happened if Knuckles had just listened to his father, but he just won't ever know. And that's the problem. At the end of the day, nothing will change the fact that he did play some part in this, that he has some responsibility, and most of all, nothing will change the fact that his dad is dead. But there's one last mistake Knuckles made: his friends. He threatened them, almost hurt Julie Sue in a way he never would have been able to take back. And Knuckles can't stomach that. So, much like with his family in Albion, Knuckles watches and hides from them. And though he is able to come to the conclusion that he needs to stick with them, that doesn't mean the ambiguity of the situation or his growing confusion and sense of helplessness are suddenly easy to manage. And I love how real his friends' reactions feel to me. Some voice their concerns to others, while some don't have much of a direct reaction, acting more or less normal around him. Then there are those who offer advice when they can, or allow Knuckles the perspective he needs by talking about their own problems. But still, as Knuckles' feelings of helplessness grow, they threaten to hurt the one he loves most. See, Julie Sue is worried about Knuckles, and when she goes to check up on him, he's acting cold and distant, and eventually starts talking about how he's a screw-up who can't trust himself to do anything right. He says that maybe if he just followed along with everyone else, stopped thinking for himself, things would be better. You did that too, you know.
So what do you want me to do? I listen to my dad and I'm alone forever. I listen to everyone else and I let Angel Island get torn apart. I listen to myself and I make everything worse.
Nux.
Don't try to tell me that everything will work out. My dad is gone. My people were almost wiped out. I can't face my mother. I don't know what to do, and it's driving me crazy.
This scene is perfect. Knuckles is hot-headed and impulsive, his anger an extension of his inability to calmly communicate the self-loathing and fear he feels. Meanwhile, Julie Sue's anger is pointed, stemming from an intense desire to protect what she cares about. She can't stand to see Knuckles belittling himself like this. However, her agitated and blunt attempts to steer him away from those self-destructive tendencies come off to Knuckles, as if she's upset with him as a person and not the pain that's consuming him. I mean, when she says, "Don't you dare think this affects only you," she isn't mad at Knuckles for being upset. She's frustrated because he thinks he's somehow alone in this. She hates that he's growing more distant from her and that he's trying to carry this on his own. And of course, there's the way they both leave the argument. While Knuckles is mad at Julie Sue because she's attacking him, Julie Sue is mad that Knuckles is once again choosing to isolate himself. It's a wonderful web of intentions, miscommunications, and subtext, where by the end you can feel that neither of them understand what the other wants or needs. And because they're both very aggressive personalities, they act harshly towards each other here. This is the first real fight they've ever had as a couple, and one so loaded with baggage that I wasn't even sure how these two simple teens would begin to unpack it all, let alone be able to dissect the emotional side of things. I could see Julie Sue or Knuckles thinking the other hates them now, or pretending like it didn't happen, creating a constant tension. In the worst case, they could end up like Knuckles' own parents, constantly fighting and talking past the other until they can't bear it any longer. With Knuckles already, like his father, choosing to take out all his personal baggage on the one he loves most. But instead, we have this.
I'm messed up right now. Can I say I'm sorry and work on it later?
Sure. I'm sorry for yelling.
Okay.
So, no, Knuckles won't let his grief take away what he has left. Instead, he holds on. He and Julie Sue immediately remove any obstacle keeping their partner from knowing that they still love them. Heck, in universe, I don't even think 10 minutes has passed since their argument, because while Knuckles and Julie Sue may not have most or any answers really, they do have each other. And that uncomplicated desire to be with each other is what has always made their relationship work. Because for them, being in love really is as simple as just knowing they are. And it's because of that relationship that Knuckles finds something to hold on to in this horrible part of his life. To finally smile again, to be able to know it's gonna be okay, and to realize that he is committed to fighting Eggman and continuing to protect others, even if that means he's forced to fight his people. But where before Knuckles struggled to face this fact, now he confidently accepts it as the right thing to do, for both the world and his kind. And it's that acceptance that's the heart of our final arc, Knuckles the Return. Because no matter what connections he's built and maintained, Knuckles is still, in one very specific way, alone. While he may not quite be the last of his kind altogether, he also is. He's the last guardian, and after wandering around for so much of his life trying to get answers, no one is left to tell him about his people's history. However, that's been the last thing on Knuckles' mind for a while now. After all, Knuckles thought he had learned everything he needed to know from the Brotherhood, and lately he seemed to have far more peace of mind. So when he comes upon parts of Angel Island he was unaware of or encounters pieces of his past that he can't comprehend, he grows increasingly frustrated. Because, as he says, apparently someone is still keeping secrets from me. The implication here is clear. Knuckles wants answers not just because it's his duty as a guardian, but because this is something he was meant to get from his father. All in all, this hyperfixation on the past is just another way he's focused on his dad and his death. So, just as Knuckles clinging to his trauma has threatened his relationships and his peace of mind, his history might too. Because, in a sick twist of fate, the only one left who could possibly give him any answers is Dr. Finitivus. See, Finitivus has been at work while he's away. He's joined with Dr. Eggman once again, attaching chains to Angel Island that will drag it back down to the very hole it sprung from all those centuries ago. So now these two individuals, focused on their people's past, are once again on a collision course. But when Knuckles faces the Doctor, Finitivus doesn't jump to a fight. No, he wants to talk with Knuckles. After all, they've both been looking for the same thing, haven't they? Answers. If Knuckles will join him, Finitivus can give him those answers. The clarity he's searched for his entire life. Anything he wants.
Anything I want. I want my father back! I want to be able to face my mother again! I want to be able to face my people again! And I want you off my island!
I adore this scene because of what it represents for Knuckles. See, this moment doesn't feel like a real decision for him. I mean, sure, Finitivus is trying to tempt him, but there was never any chance Knuckles would begin to consider that. Because unlike the Brotherhood, who constantly made concessions and compromises based on a twisted sense of the greater good, Knuckles cannot set aside his own feelings here. The other Echidnas certainly tried to teach him to do that, but Knuckles doesn't need another lesson. He doesn't need another answer. Knuckles would never burn the world for knowledge, as Finitivus says, or give up what he cares about to learn these answers. He will not repeat the mistakes of his forefathers, and he will not allow the past to consume him. Instead, he will look at and rely on the things he wants, on the things he cares about. And he wants this conniving representation of his people's sins and his past off his mind and off his island. And in this fight, Knuckles actually allows himself to tap into some of the Master Emerald's power again, a power that he hasn't used since his time as Enerjak. But more important than that, he controls it, going toe-to-toe with his evil counterpart. But that strength isn't what allows him to win this fight. After all, Finitivus was created with those same powers and has his technology on top of it. But there's something else Finitivus doesn't have. He doesn't have a partner to watch his back and help him learn from his past mistakes. Just watching your back, hun.
I knew I could count on you. Now, like I said before, get off my island.
So, where before Finitivus fled from Knuckles' island, now Knuckles casts him away of his own volition. He won't allow the specter of his failures to hang over his head, and he won't allow himself to cling to that any longer. Knuckles throwing Finitivus away is him letting go of all those things that have consumed him. And where before Knuckles decided he had to face his duties as a guardian alone, this time he chooses to have his partner fight alongside him. As Knuckles lets Julie Sue know that even if Finitivus were telling the truth about having answers, it wouldn't matter. None of that could be worth giving up what he has now. This history and his heritage, he will no longer let that threaten what he holds dear. Does this mean Knuckles has completely moved on? No, of course not. There are no simple answers that will get him through his struggles, but that's the point. Even if there aren't answers, even if he can't peer into the past or the future to find out what he should do, he knows what he has now. He knows that he has a life full of people he loves, full of people who will stay at his side, and that, at least in these moments, he can be truly happy with. After watching this boy go through so much with his people and his father, seeing him finally content, finally letting himself be happy in the moment, it's such a wonderful capstone to this character arc. And so the story concludes with Angel Island breaking free of Finitivus' chains and flying away from the birthplace of Echidnopolis, an evocative image that, to me, perfectly represents what Knuckles has done here. He has finally broken free of the chains of the past. He has decided how he will be a guardian, and he's decided that he'll watch the sun rise on a new day, trusting that this time, the people he loves won't be going anywhere anytime soon. Because in the end, it wasn't Locke who saved Knuckles, it wasn't his abuser. No, it was the people who have actually been here for him this whole time. Those who have actually watched over him, and those who have actually always wanted what's best for their favorite guardian. If you've read the Archie Sonic comic, then you've probably noticed that there's a bunch of stuff wrapped up in the Knuckles story that I skimmed over or skipped. Stuff with the Dark Legion, the Dingoes, the Chaotix, and all the stories that follow this moment right here. And I will discuss those things in time. But for now, I wanted to focus on this. That, at its heart, Archie Knuckles' story is about a young man healing from his trauma and pain, coping with a world that seems impossible to face without losing yourself in the chaos of it all, and how the way you can make it through is by holding on to your loved ones. And I just think that's wonderful.